There is something happening beneath your feet right now. Not metaphorically. Not as a figure of speech. Literally, physically, at this very moment, beneath the floor you are lying on, beneath the foundations of wherever you are, beneath the pavement or the earth or the grass outside your window, something is moving, something is communicating, something has been doing so since long before the first human being ever opened their eyes and looked up at the sky and tried to make sense of what they saw. And it has never stopped. Not once. Not for a single night in 450 million years. Take a moment with that number, not to understand it, because no one truly understands a number that large, but just to feel the edges of it. 450 million years, there were no flowers yet when this began. There were no birds. There were no dinosaurs. There were no fish with legs hauling themselves onto the land and blinking in the light. The land itself was strange and bare and largely empty of the life we would recognize, and yet, in the soil of that ancient world, already, the threads were moving. We are going to spend tonight in that world. Not the ancient world, though we will brush up against deep time more than once before morning. Tonight we are going to spend our time in the world that exists right now, beneath every forest on this earth, beneath every stand of trees, beneath every woodland path and mossy bank and quiet grove where the light comes through the leaves in long slow shafts in the late afternoon, the world of the mycelium, the wood wide web. The forest is not what it looks like from the outside. That is the thing. That is the fact that changes everything once you hold it. We have been walking through forests for our entire existence as a species, 200,000 years of human beings moving through trees, sheltering in them, building with them, watching them through seasons and storms and the long turning of years, and in all that time, we thought we understood what a forest was. We thought it was a collection of individual trees. We thought it was competition, each tree reaching upward for the light, spreading its roots outward for the water, growing as fast as it could in the race for resources, and we mapped this onto everything, because it is the story we knew, the story of individuals striving, competing, succeeding or failing on their own merits. But beneath the surface, the forest had a completely different story running. And it was running it the whole time, in the dark, in the silence, in the soil where no one was looking. Beneath every forest floor, beneath the leaf litter, which is itself a whole world, and beneath the topsoil, which is another world again, there is a network of fungal threads so fine and so numerous that they beggar the imagination, threads called hyphae, each one thinner than a human hair, each one a single long cell reaching through the dark, branching, connecting, weaving. In a single teaspoon of healthy forest soil, there can be more than 8 miles of these threads. 8 miles, in a teaspoon. Coiled and folded and threaded through a space you could cup in one hand, and across an entire forest floor, the numbers become something that arithmetic alone cannot hold. Hundreds of miles, thousands, an invisible infrastructure of breathtaking delicacy and breathtaking scale, occupying the same space at the same time, doing its work in the dark without fanfare, without any need to be seen. This is the mycelium. And the mycelium connects the trees. Not loosely. Not incidentally. The fungal threads actually grow into the root systems of the trees themselves, wrapping around the finest root tips, or in some cases growing inside the root cells, threading between the cell walls, branching there in structures so small and so intricate that they were given their own name, arbuscules, from the Latin for little tree, because that is what they look like under a microscope, a tiny, branching, many-fingered tree, growing inside the cell of another tree, fitting there as if that space had always been intended for it. And through those connections, through those microscopic branching structures inside the root cells, the exchange happens. The tree gives the fungus sugars, carbon-rich sugars made in the leaves from sunlight, sent down through the trunk and the roots to the tips where the fungus waits, and the fungus gives the tree water, and phosphorus, and nitrogen, and access to a root system that now extends not just as far as the tree's own roots reach, but as far as the mycelium reaches, which is everywhere. Some estimates suggest that mycorrhizal fungi can extend a tree's ability to absorb nutrients by up to 1,000 times. 1,000 times. The tree you see above ground, the full height of it, the spread of its canopy, the weight of its centuries, is only part of what that tree is. The rest of it is underground, the rest of it is fungal. The rest of it is woven into the same web that connects it to every other tree in the forest. And the web does more than feed. When a tree is under stress, when insects are eating its leaves, or drought is thinning its water supply, or disease is moving through its bark, it releases chemical signals, and some of those signals travel through the mycelium, moving along the threads through the soil, arriving at the root systems of neighboring trees as a kind of warning, and the neighboring trees respond, begin producing defensive compounds, prepare themselves, before the threat has even reached them. As if the forest received a message. As if someone sent word ahead through the dark. And then there is the carbon. The oldest, largest trees in a forest, the ones that have been there the longest, that are most deeply woven into the network, that Dr. Suzanne Samar, working in the forests of British Columbia, called the mother trees. These trees send carbon through the mycelium to the smallest, youngest seedlings growing in the shade beneath them, seedlings that cannot yet photosynthesize efficiently, that are struggling in the shadow of the very canopy that their own parents form. The mother trees feed them, through the web, through the dark, in the only language available. I have always found this the most quietly astonishing part of all of it, not the scale of the network, not the chemistry of the exchange, but this, the image of a 300-year-old tree sending nourishment down through its roots, through the fungal threads, to a seedling that has barely broken through the leaf litter, a seedling that may be its own offspring, genetically, the network carrying something that, if we encountered it between human beings, we would not hesitate to call care. The forest was not a competition. It was never a competition. It was, this whole time, something much closer to a family. And now, let that settle, let it move through whatever part of your mind is still moving tonight, because we can let the rest go now. You are here, right now, in the dark, in the quiet, and whatever the day was, whatever it asked of you, whatever it took, whatever you are still turning over in the back of your mind, it is allowed to rest, it is allowed to simply set itself down. You do not have to solve anything before you sleep. That is not a requirement. Not here. This is not a space that asks anything of you at all. It is simply a place where something very old and very slow and very beautiful is going to unfold, at whatever pace your body needs. And if you fall asleep before the end, if the words become a current you drift on rather than a story you follow, that is not a failure. That is exactly what this is for. These nights can feel long. I know that. The quiet, when sleep is slow in coming, can press in with a particular kind of weight, the mind finding things to turn over, old worries to revisit, tomorrow's shape already assembling itself at the edges of the dark, and there is something to be said, in those moments, for having company, even quiet company, even just a voice beside you in the dark, talking softly about ancient fungi and mother trees and the extraordinary secret life of the forest floor. It is good to have you here. That is a simple and genuine thing to say. I am glad you came. Tonight we are going to go slowly. We are going to follow the mycelium down into the soil, down into the cool dark where the threads move. We are going to sit with the oldest trees and feel the patience of them. We are going to let the science of this world do the thing that good science sometimes does, when you come to it in the right frame of mind, which is to make you feel, unexpectedly and deeply, less alone. There is no rush. The network has been running for 450 million years. It was running last night while you slept, and it will be running tomorrow, and it will be running long after everything we have built and named and worried about has returned to the soil it came from. It does not need us to hurry. So, settle now. Let your weight move down into whatever is beneath you. Let your shoulders release. Let your jaw unclench if it has been holding. Let your hands rest open or loosely closed, whichever feels like less effort. Let your breath find its own pace. You do not need to control it, just let it move, in and out, in the same slow rhythm that everything breathes. The soil is dark beneath us. And in that darkness, right now, a thread of mycelium is carrying something, moving it from one place to another, in the quiet, unhurried way that only very old things know how to move. And the trees are standing, as they have always stood, holding the sky. We are going in. To understand the wood wide web, we need to begin somewhere unexpected. We need to begin with emptiness. Not the emptiness of space, not the vast and starlit emptiness that we tend to reach for when we want to feel the scale of things, but a much quieter, much closer emptiness, the emptiness of bare rock. Imagine a landscape without soil. This is not a thought experiment. This was the actual surface of this planet for most of its history. For the first 4 billion years of the Earth's existence, the land was essentially bare. Rock. Mineral. Stone shaped by water and wind, broken down slowly, endlessly, into smaller pieces of stone, but not soil. Not yet. Because soil is not simply crushed rock, soil is something else entirely. Soil is what happens when rock and life meet and stay together long enough to change each other. And the organism that made that meeting possible, that created the conditions for soil to exist at all, for plants to colonize the land, for forests to rise, for every terrestrial ecosystem that has ever existed to take hold, was the fungus. This is the part of the story that tends to get overlooked. We talk about the wood wide web as if it is a feature of forests, as if trees came first and then the fungi arrived and wove themselves in. But the sequence was the other way around. The fungi were on land 300 million years before the first true plants made it out of the water, 300 million years of fungi working the bare rock surface, breaking down minerals, building the first thin films of organic matter, creating the chemical environment that would eventually make it possible for a small green plant to put down a root and survive. The fungi did not join the forest. The fungi built the conditions for the forest. And when the first land plants did appear, simple, rootless things, more like mosses than anything we would call a tree. They arrived into a world already threaded with fungal networks, and immediately, almost immediately in the geological sense, they formed partnerships with those networks, partnerships so successful, so mutually beneficial, that they were never abandoned, that persist, in essentially the same form, in the roots of the trees standing outside your window right now. 450 million years of the same relationship. That is the age of the mycorrhizal partnership, older than flowers, older than seeds, older than roots as we know them today, the most ancient and most widespread symbiosis on land, and almost entirely invisible. Let us go into the soil. Let us begin with the individual thread. A single hypha, one thread of fungal growth, is so fine it is measured in micrometers, millionths of a meter, a unit so small that several thousand hyphae laid side by side would still not span the width of a human hair. Under a microscope, a single hypha looks like a glass tube, almost transparent, the cell contents just visible inside it as faint shadows. It appears fragile, it appears like almost nothing at all. But a hypha does not stay single for long. It branches. At intervals along its length, new threads emerge at angles, themselves branching, those branches branching again, in the same fractal pattern that trees use, that rivers use, that blood vessels use, that lightning uses when it moves through the sky, the pattern that living systems return to again and again because it is the most efficient way to fill a three-dimensional space with the least material, to reach everywhere, from a single starting point, touching everything. And as the hyphae branch and grow and fill the available space in the soil, they weave together into what we call mycelium, not a collection of separate threads but a single, continuous, interconnected structure, a mat, a web, a living fabric woven through every millimeter of healthy soil. In a single teaspoon of forest soil, there can be more than 8 miles of hyphae. 8 miles, in the bowl of a spoon. And across an entire forest, across the hectares of an old-growth woodland, the kind of forest that has had centuries to develop its full network, the total length of fungal threads in the soil runs into numbers that lose meaning almost immediately, millions of miles, a number that is easier to feel than to calculate. Now, the tree. When a fungal hypha growing through the soil encounters a tree root, and in any healthy forest soil this encounter is not rare, it is essentially inevitable. The soil is so full of both that contact is constant, something very precise and very ancient happens. The hypha does not simply brush past. It recognizes the root. There are chemical signals involved, compounds released by the root that the fungus can detect, compounds released by the fungus that the root can detect, a chemical conversation happening at a scale far below anything we can see, and if the signals are right, if this particular fungus and this particular tree are compatible partners, the hypha begins to grow toward the root, deliberately, directionally, in a way that looks, at the cellular level, almost purposeful. What happens next depends on the type of mycorrhizal relationship. In one form, the ectomycorrhizal form, found in oaks and beeches and pines and many of the great trees of northern forests, the fungal hyphae wrap around the outside of the finest root tips, forming a dense sheath, a fungal sleeve around the root, and then extend inward between the outer cells of the root, threading into the spaces there without ever actually entering the cells themselves, creating an interface, a zone of contact, where nutrients and sugars can be exchanged across. the thin membranes of the cell walls. In the other form, the arbuscular mycorrhizal form, which is even older and even more widespread, found in the majority of all land plants, the fungus goes further. It actually enters the root cells, pushing through the cell wall without breaking it, invaginating the cell membrane, growing inside the cell in those branching, many-fingered structures called arbuscules, from the Latin for little tree, because under a microscope, that is exactly what they look like. A tiny tree growing inside a cell, inside a root, inside a tree. Nested, contained, perfectly fitted. And through the arbuscules, through that intimate branching contact inside the living cell, the exchange happens. The tree passes sugar. Carbon-rich sugar, made in the leaves from sunlight and carbon dioxide, sent down through the phloem, the living transport tissue of the tree, from the canopy all the way down through the trunk, through the branches, through the roots, to the finest root tips where the fungus is waiting, and the fungus receives it, uses some of it for its own growth, its own metabolism, its own ongoing work of threading through the soil. And in return, the fungus passes water, phosphorus, nitrogen, the building blocks of proteins, the raw materials of every cell the tree will ever build, minerals that the fungal hyphae have dissolved from soil particles, from rock surfaces, from the slow chemical breakdown of the mineral world, gathered from places the tree's own roots could never reach, because the hyphae are so fine they can penetrate spaces in the soil structure that roots, even the finest root hairs, cannot enter. The fungus is, in effect, the tree's extended root system. Not a metaphor, a functional reality. Some researchers estimate that the mycorrhizal network can increase a tree's access to water and phosphorus by factors of 10, 20, 50, in some studies approaching 1,000. The tree without its fungal partners is not simply a tree with smaller roots, it is a fundamentally diminished organism, cut off from the majority of its own capacity. This is the part one finds most worth sitting with, the idea that what we see when we look at a tree, the full grandeur of it, the canopy, the trunk, the deep-rootedness of it, is only part of what the tree actually is. The other part is underground, invisible, woven into the soil, extending far beyond the drip line of the canopy, and it is fungal. The tree is not entirely a tree. It is a collaboration, presenting itself as a single organism, because that is what a collaboration, sustained over 450 million years, eventually becomes. Now, the network. The reason we call it the Wood Wide Web, the reason this has become one of the most discussed and most quietly astonishing discoveries in modern biology, is not the individual partnership between one fungus and one tree, beautiful as that is, it is what happens when the network scales. A single mycorrhizal fungus does not partner with just one tree. Its hyphae spread through the soil and connect to the roots of many trees, sometimes dozens, sometimes hundreds, trees of different species, trees of different ages, trees standing close together and trees separated by considerable distances, and those trees are themselves connected to other fungal networks, which connect to other trees, so that across a forest, the individual partnerships multiply and overlap and interweave until what you have is not a collection of bilateral relationships but a single, enormous, multiply-connected web. A network. And networks have properties that individual connections do not. Information can travel across a network, not just from A to B, but from A to every node in the system, by multiple routes, with redundancy, with the resilience that comes from having more than one path between any 2 points. When a tree at the edge of a forest is attacked by aphids, chemical signals enter the mycorrhizal network, and within hours, trees elsewhere in the forest, trees that have had no direct contact with the aphids, trees that are separated from the attacked tree by other trees, by clearings, by streams, begin producing volatile defensive compounds, terpenes, tannins, chemical deterrents that make the leaves less palatable, less habitable, less useful to an insect trying to build a colony. The forest received a warning and responded collectively. Carbon moves through the network too, and the direction of that movement is not random. In experiments where individual carbon atoms were tagged with radioactive markers and introduced into one tree, those atoms appeared in neighboring trees within hours, having moved through the mycelium, from root system to root system, through the threads in the soil, and the movement was not uniform, it was directed, flowing toward the trees that needed it most, toward the shadiest corners of the forest, toward the seedlings struggling in the understory. Dr. Suzanne Samar, whose decades of research in the forests of British Columbia laid the foundation for much of what we now understand about this network, found that the largest, oldest, most connected trees in a forest, the ones she named mother trees, were not simply receiving from the network, they were contributing to it, disproportionately, sending carbon outward through their roots into the web, and that carbon flowing preferentially towards smaller, younger trees, towards seedlings, and in some cases, towards seedlings that were genetically their own offspring, growing in the shade of the very canopy their parent had spent centuries building. The mother tree feeding her children. Through the dark, through the soil, through the only language available. When Samar first published these findings, she was met with significant resistance, not because the science was weak, but because the implications were uncomfortable, because what she had found suggested that trees were not simply competing organisms, that the forest was not simply a battlefield of individuals, that something was happening in the soil that looked, if you were willing to follow the evidence, remarkably like cooperation, remarkably like mutual support, remarkably, in some of its features, like care. Science moves carefully around words like that. And that carefulness is right and proper. We should not project human qualities onto organisms that do not have minds as we understand them, and yet the behavior is real. The carbon flows toward need, the warning signals travel through the network, the mother trees send more to their own seedlings than to unrelated ones, whatever we call it, whatever language we use or decline to use, the pattern is there. The forest is doing something. Something that looks, from the outside, like looking after its own. Now, gently, we are going to let the explanation rest. We have been moving through the science of this, and the science is extraordinary, and there is more of it still to come, but there is another way to be in this world, not understanding it but inhabiting it, not mapping it but simply being present inside it. And so, let us go there. Imagine a forest in the deep of the night. Not a forest at dusk, when the light is still withdrawing and the birds are still audible in the canopy, not a forest at dawn, when the first pale light is beginning to feel its way between the trunks, a forest at the very center of the night, the hour that belongs entirely to the dark. The sky above the canopy, where you can see it through the gaps in the leaves, is a deep, saturated blue-black, not the black of a sealed room, but the black of open space, of real depth, of something that goes on, and the forest beneath that sky is very, very still. These are old trees. That is the first thing you notice, or rather feel, because in this darkness you cannot see the trees so much as sense them, sense their mass, their presence, the way they displace the air around them. These are not young trees, not the slender uniform trees of a recently planted wood where every trunk is the same thickness and every crown is the same height. These are ancient things, each one entirely itself, shaped by its own centuries, by its own particular history of storms and droughts and the slow settling of its roots into the specific chemistry of this specific patch of ground. One of them, the largest, stands perhaps 30 meters away. You cannot see it clearly. You can see its outline against the slightly less dark sky, the mass of it, the spread of its canopy, the way its upper branches reach outward with the unhurried confidence of something that has been reaching for a very long time. Its trunk, at the base, is wider than you could wrap your arms around, wider than two of you, side by side, arms spread, and the bark of it is deeply furrowed, ridged and valid in patterns that took 3 centuries to build, patterns that are as specific to this tree as a fingerprint. Moss covers the lower trunk. Not a thin dusting of moss but a deep, soft, fully established moss community, multiple species, each occupying its preferred zone on the bark, each a different shade of green in daylight, now simply dark against dark, and the moss is holding water. You can sense that even in the dark, a faint coolness, a slight softening of the air near the trunk, the particular smell that moss releases when it is damp. That smell, that deep, cool, green and earth smell of a forest at night, when the temperature has dropped and the moisture has risen and everything that was dried back by the afternoon has begun to release its held water into the air. It is one of the oldest smells there is, petrichor, and something beneath petrichor, something that does not have a name, the smell of soil that is alive. The ground beneath your feet is soft. Not soft like carpet, not soft like sand, soft like something that has been building itself for centuries, forest soil, which is one of the most extraordinary materials on this planet, a deep, layered, living substance that is part mineral, part organic matter, part water, part air, and part, a very large part, biology. Every autumn, the trees shed their leaves, and those leaves fall onto the forest floor and begin their long transformation, first becoming leaf litter, still recognizably themselves but softened, beginning to break down, then becoming something darker, less defined, the individual leaves merging into a general layer of decomposing material, and then, slowly, over years, becoming soil, becoming the dark, crumbling, mineral-rich earth that the next generation of roots will grow into. And running through all of it, through the leaf litter and the decomposing matter and the deep dark soil beneath, the mycelium. You cannot see it. There is nothing visible from up here, standing on the surface, no sign at all that anything extraordinary is happening below. The forest floor looks like forest floor, dark and soft and covered in last autumn's leaves. But if you could shrink, if you could reduce yourself to the scale of a soil particle, a grain of mineral the size of a pinhead, which is already a world at the right scale, you would find yourself inside something that looks entirely different. You would find yourself inside a structure of almost incomprehensible complexity and density. Threads everywhere. Threads running in all directions, threads crossing threads, threads branching into finer threads, those finer threads branching into finer still, and between the threads, the soil particles, each one coated in thin films of water, each water film carrying dissolved minerals in concentrations that vary from particle to particle, and the root hairs of the trees, far larger than the fungal threads, enormous by comparison, extending down through the spaces between the soil particles like pale, slow-moving fingers feeling through the dark. And the threads of the mycelium weaving around all of it, wrapping around the root hairs, wrapping around the mineral particles, threading through every available space with that patient, fractal, entirely unhurried branching. The threads are moving. Not visibly. Not in any way that could be seen, even at this scale. But at the molecular level, the threads are deeply active. Water is moving through them by osmosis, flowing along concentration gradients from wet spaces toward dry. Mineral ions are being transported, carried along the threads in protein-lined channels, moved from where they were dissolved to where they are needed. Sugars from the tree are arriving at the fungal cells and being taken in, metabolized, used as fuel for the ongoing work of growth and maintenance. And signals, chemical signals, moving along the threads in both directions, molecules that carry information about conditions somewhere else in the network, about moisture levels, about nutrient availability, about the chemical signs of stress or of abundance, a continuous, slow, molecular conversation carried on across the entire extent of the network simultaneously. This is not metaphor. There are no words being spoken here, no thoughts being formed, no awareness, as far as we know, of any kind, and yet information is moving, and the network is responding to that information, adjusting the flow of resources toward where they are needed, carrying warnings from stressed trees to unstressed trees, maintaining, in its own chemical language, a kind of picture of the state of the entire forest. A picture made of molecules, held in the dark, in the soil that no one sees. There is something about being in this space, even in imagination, even lying still in the dark at the end of a long day, that does something very specific to the noise in the mind. It slows it. Because the scale of this is so different from the scale of the things we tend to worry about, the time scale here is so much longer, the process is so much more patient, the whole web so entirely indifferent to urgency, and something in us responds to that. Something in the nervous system recognizes the deep time of it and releases, slightly, the way you release when you stand at the edge of the ocean, or look up at a clear night sky, the particular release that comes from encountering something so much larger and older than yourself that your own scale suddenly seems, for a moment, correctly proportioned, small, and held, both at once. You are here in the dark, and the forest is here, going about its ancient business without any need for your attention, without any requirement that you follow or understand. The threads are moving in the soil, the carbon is flowing, the signals are passing from root to root, and it will all still be happening when you wake up. It was all still happening while you slept last night. It has been happening every night of your life, beneath every patch of ground you have ever stood on, whether you knew it or not. It is good to know. That is what I find myself thinking, sitting here in the dark with you. Not that it is useful to know, not that it changes anything practical, simply that it is good, that the world is this interconnected, this ancient, this quietly and persistently alive. It is good to have company in the knowing of it. If the edges of sleep are coming, let them come. There is nothing here that holds you. The forest does not need witnesses, it simply is, and you are allowed to simply be, drifting, softly, into the dark that the forest knows so well. The threads are still moving. Somewhere in the soil, a molecule of phosphorus is being carried along a hypha, moving through the dark in the direction of a root that needs it, and it has no knowledge of this, and no urgency. It is simply moving, the way things move when they have been moving for 450 million years. Slowly, quietly, in the direction of what needs them. There is a question that the mycelium raises without meaning to. Not a question with an answer that fits neatly into a sentence. Not a question for a quiz or a textbook. A question more like a window, something you walk up to and look through, and the view on the other side is larger than the room you are standing in. The question is simply this: where do you end? We assume we know. The skin, we say. The skin is the boundary. On this side of the skin is me, and on the other side is everything else, and it feels obvious. It feels like the most foundational fact of being a living thing, this sense of a self that ends somewhere definite and a world that begins just beyond that ending. But the forest has been quietly, persistently, for 450 million years, suggesting that this is not quite right. That the boundary is not where we think it is. That the boundary is not, in any deep biological sense, a boundary at all. Consider what you are made of. Every atom in your body, every carbon atom in every cell, every calcium atom in every bone, every iron atom in every red blood cell carrying oxygen through you right now as you lie in the dark, every single one of those atoms was somewhere else before it was you. The carbon in your cells was atmospheric carbon dioxide before it was you. It was floating in the air, part of the invisible chemistry of the atmosphere, before a plant absorbed it through the tiny pores in its leaves and fixed it into sugar in the ancient process of photosynthesis, before that sugar moved through the plant's tissues and into the soil, or into the body of something that ate the plant, and then into the body of something that ate that, and then, eventually, through a chain of transformations so long and so branching that no one could trace it in full, into the food that became the body that is you. The calcium in your bones was mineral calcium, locked in rock or dissolved in water, before a plant absorbed it through its roots, through its mycorrhizal fungal extensions reaching into the mineral soil, and built it into its own tissues, and those tissues entered the food chain, and the chain led, eventually, here? The iron in your blood was forged inside a star? That is not a metaphor, that is the literal origin of every iron atom that has ever existed, the nuclear fusion reactions at the heart of stars, processes so energetic they can only happen in something that large, assembling heavier elements from lighter ones, and when those stars exhausted their fuel and collapsed and exploded, they scattered their contents across space, and some of that material became the dust cloud that became the solar system that became the earth that became the rock that became the soil that became the plant that became the food that became you. You are, in the most literal and physical sense, made of the universe. Made of it, not by it, not placed into it from outside, but assembled from it, the way a wave is assembled from the ocean, the same material, temporarily organized into a particular shape, for a particular span of time. And this means, and here is the thought worth sitting with, that the boundary we feel so certain of, the boundary at the skin, is a boundary of organization rather than a boundary of substance. Inside the skin, the atoms are arranged in the pattern of you. Outside the skin, they are arranged in other patterns, but they are the same atoms. They have been in other patterns before. they will be in other patterns after. The boundary is temporary. The substance is shared. And if this feels abstract, if it feels like philosophy rather than something you can actually feel, try letting it land differently. Try letting it be not an idea but a physical sensation, the sensation of the air moving in through your nose right now. That air was outside you a moment ago, now it is inside you. The oxygen in it is crossing the membranes of your lung cells as you lie here, entering your blood, becoming, for a moment, part of the chemistry. That keeps you alive, and in a few seconds it will be breathed out again, back into the room, back into the world, carrying carbon dioxide that was inside your cells a moment ago. You are not separate from the air. You are in continuous exchange with it. The boundary breathes. And what the mycelium shows us, what the Wood Wide Web demonstrates with 450 million years of evidence, is that this is not an exception, this is the rule, that living things are not sealed units existing in parallel with each other. They are nodes in a network, defined not by their separation but by their connections, not by what they keep out but by what they exchange. The tree is not separate from the fungus. The fungus is not separate from the soil. The soil is not separate from the fallen leaves. The leaves were not separate from the tree that grew them. And the tree was not separate from the mycelium that fed it. It is one system, it has always been one system, we are just too large and too brief to see it that way without help. Tonight the forest is offering that help. Now, there is something closer to home that we should visit. Because the logic of the mycelium is not confined to the forest floor. Right now, in your body, as you lie here in the dark, there is a community. Your gut contains somewhere in the region of 38 trillion microbial cells, bacteria, archaea, fungi, viruses, a number so large it is roughly comparable to the total number of human cells in your body. And these microorganisms are not simply passengers, they are not hitchhikers making use of a warm environment without contributing anything in return. They are partners. They digest things your own cells cannot digest, they produce vitamins your body cannot synthesize, they train and regulate your immune system, influencing which threats it responds to and how strongly. And they communicate with your brain. The gut-brain axis, this is what the researchers call it, the two-way chemical communication highway that runs between the community of microbes in your gut and the neurons in your head, and it runs in both directions. The brain sends signals down to the gut, which is why anxiety lives in the stomach, why stress changes digestion, why fear has a physical address in the body, and the gut sends signals up to the brain. The microbes in your gut produce neurotransmitters. Serotonin, the molecule most closely associated with feelings of calm and well-being, approximately 90% of your body's serotonin is produced not in the brain but in the gut, produced there by the microbiome, by the community of organisms living in the warm dark of your digestive system, produced there and sent upward, influencing your mood, your anxiety, your capacity for sleep, your experience of this very moment. How you feel right now is partly a product of organisms you have never thought about, organisms that have been living in partnership with your body since before you were born, organisms that your immune system learned, in the first months of your life, to recognize as self rather than other, to welcome rather than attack. You are, even in the most intimate interior of your own body, a community, a network, a web of relationships between organisms that depend on each other. Sound familiar? the forest in the soil, and the forest in you. The same ancient logic, running in parallel, at every scale, the logic that says no single organism is ever truly complete alone, the logic that says connection is not optional, not an extra, not something that improves upon an already functional system. Connection is the mechanism, connection is what makes the system work at all. And this is the thought I find most quietly, most persistently comforting. Because it means that the feeling of connection, the feeling of being part of something larger than yourself, the feeling that surfaces unexpectedly on certain evenings when the light does something particular, or in the middle of the night when you hear rain on the roof and feel, for a moment, entirely at peace, that feeling is not an illusion. It is not wishful thinking. It is not your brain generating comfort in the absence of evidence. It is accurate. Your nervous system is correctly perceiving the truth of your situation, which is that you are woven into the world, woven into it the way the mycelium is woven into the soil, so completely, so anciently, so at every level of your biology, that the sense of separation is the illusion, and the sense of connection is the reality. You are held, not by anything you have to earn, not by anything conditional, not held in the way that requires you to be a particular kind of person or to have done particular things or to be in a particular state of mind, simply held, the way everything is held, by the web of processes and relationships and ancient chemical conversations that make up the living world. The same world that built the mycelium built you. The same processes, the same materials, the same ancient, patient, endlessly creative logic of connection. You belong here, not as a guest, not as an observer, as a part. Let us stay in the forest a little longer. Because there is something about the oldest trees that we have not yet visited, something that takes us into a dimension of this world that I find, particularly at night, particularly in the quiet, especially moving. The oldest trees in the world's great forests are not simply large. They are old in a way that changes their relationship with everything around them. A tree that has been growing for 500 years has been through things. It has been through centuries of winters, each one different, some brutal and prolonged, some mild and brief. It has been through droughts that lasted for years, that cracked the soil and thinned the canopy and pushed the root systems down to depths where even the dry years could not reach. It has been through insect outbreaks that stripped the leaves from the canopy and forced the tree to draw on its reserves, to slow its growth, to wait. It has been through storms that took major branches and left wounds in the bark that are now, centuries later, grown over and incorporated into the larger shape of the trunk, detectable only as a slight unevenness in the wood grain deep inside. All of that history is stored, not in memory as we understand it, not in images or narratives, but in wood, in the annual rings that record every year's growth, thin rings for hard years, wide rings for good ones, in the chemistry of the bark and the heartwood, in the architecture of the root system, which has been adjusting and extending and deepening for centuries in response to every shift in the soil's chemistry and moisture. And in the mycorrhizal network. Because the network itself has a history. A mycorrhizal network in an old-growth forest is not the same network it was a century ago. The individual fungi within it have lived and died on much shorter timescales. But the pattern of connections, the web of relationships between specific trees and specific fungal lineages, has been maintained, rebuilt and reinforced and elaborated across generations of fungi, each generation inheriting something of the relational architecture of the one before. The network remembers. Not the way you remember, not in images or words, but in the way a community remembers, which is deeper and more durable than the way any individual remembers, in adapted chemistry, in established pathways, in the fine-tuned specificity of relationships that have been running for so long that the partners have shaped each other, the tree's root chemistry shaped by centuries of interaction with these particular fungi, the fungi's enzyme systems shaped by centuries of interaction with these particular trees. They have grown toward each other over centuries in the dark. There are mycorrhizal networks in ancient forests, in the old-growth forests of the Pacific Northwest, in the primeval forests of Central Europe, in the great boreal forests of Canada and Russia, where the network is so established, so deeply layered with history, that it functions almost like a long-term ecological memory, carrying information about past conditions in its chemistry, influencing how the forest responds to new conditions based on how it has responded before. The forest has been here before. It has been through drought before, and fire, and the slow return of conditions that allow growth, and the network carries something of all of that, not consciously, not deliberately, but structurally, chemically, in the patient accumulated way that very old systems carry the weight of their own past. Imagine a fire. Not a catastrophic fire that takes everything, but a forest fire of the kind that moves through periodically in fire-adapted ecosystems, moving through the understory, burning the leaf litter, taking the smaller trees and the shrubs, leaving the largest trees scorched but standing, their thick bark having protected the living tissue beneath. After the fire, the forest floor is ashen bare mineral soil, the canopy is thinned, the light coming through in places it never reached before, the air smells of smoke and char and the faint, strange sweetness that burned wood releases. And beneath the surface, the mycelium, insulated from the heat by the soil itself, by the moisture held deep in the earth, by the sheer depth at which the network extends, the mycelium survived, diminished, damaged in the upper layers where the heat was greatest, but alive in the deeper soil, still connected, still reaching. And within weeks of the fire, in the ash-covered soil, the first pioneer plants begin to appear. Fireweed, pushing up through the char, tiny seedlings of trees, blown in on the wind or dropped by birds, finding bare mineral soil and light in quantities the forest floor rarely sees, and the mycelium reaches for them. Immediately, the fungal hyphae growing toward the new roots with the same patient, directional reaching that they have always used, beginning to form the connections that will weave the new plants into the old network, beginning the slow work of rebuilding. The network does not wait to be restored. It begins restoring, from the moment the fire passes, with whatever is there, reaching toward whatever roots have survived or arrived, doing the only thing it knows how to do, which is connect. There is something in that image, something worth carrying. The idea that beneath the surface of things, beneath whatever has been burning, whatever has been lost, whatever has reduced the visible world to something unfamiliar and bare, beneath that, the network. Patient. Alive. Already reaching. Already beginning. You have been through things. I say that without knowing what they are. I don't need to know. The specifics belong to you and they are yours, but the fact itself, that you have carried things, that you carry things now, that you are here at the end of a day that was whatever it was, in the dark, in the quiet, seeking rest, that fact I can speak to. And what I want to say about it is this. The impulse that brought you here, to a quiet place, to stillness, to the slow process of letting the day release, that impulse is not a luxury, it is not self-indulgence, it is the same impulse that runs through the whole living world. The impulse toward restoration. Every living system spends energy, and every living system must replenish what it spends, or it cannot continue. The tree spends carbon in the heat of summer and rebuilds its reserves through the long slow drawing down of the autumn. The mycorrhizal network loses hyphae constantly to the normal processes of soil disturbance, to the grazing of soil animals, to the simple entropy of living tissue, and rebuilds them constantly, quietly, without ceremony. The body burns glucose and amino acids and the structural proteins of its own cells in the course of a day's living, and rebuilds them in the night, in the dark, in the hours of sleep. Sleep is not absence. Sleep is the underground work. Sleep is what the mycelium does, the below-surface, invisible, unhurried work of repair and consolidation and preparation, the movement of resources from where they have accumulated to where they are needed, the strengthening of connections that were used heavily during the day, the quiet, chemical, extraordinarily complex process of turning the day's experience into something the system can carry forward. You are not doing nothing when you sleep. You are doing the most important work. The work that cannot be done in the light, in the noise, in the forward-facing rush of a waking day, the work that requires stillness and darkness and the particular quality of time that only the night provides. The same darkness the mycelium works in. The same stillness. The same patient, below-the-surface chemistry of restoration. Let yourself be in it. You do not have to do anything with this. You do not have to hold on to it or remember it or turn it into something. It is simply here, and you are simply here, and the two of those things, for right now, are enough. More than enough. We are almost at the place where words begin to thin. Where the forest does not need description anymore, where it is simply present, the way old things are present, not demanding attention, not performing, just here, in the dark, going about its ancient business. Do you remember the opening? There is something happening beneath your feet right now. That is still true. It was true before you knew about mycorrhizae, and it was true before anyone knew about mycorrhizae, and it was true before there were human beings to know or not know anything, and it will be true long after. Somewhere beneath you, at this moment, if there is any soil within reach of where you lie, and even if there is not, somewhere near you, somewhere in the living world that is always nearby, always present, even in cities, even in places that seem entirely constructed and sealed, somewhere nearby, the threads are moving, carrying something from one place to another. A molecule of phosphorus on its way to a root. A carbon-rich sugar moving from a mother tree toward a seedling growing in her shadow. A warning signal, dissolved in water, traveling along a hypha in the direction of a tree that does not yet know it needs to prepare. All of it happening without urgency. All of it happening without awareness. All of it happening in the same dark, the same cool, damp, mineral-smelling dark, that has been the setting for this particular story since before there were forests to tell it in. And you are part of this story. Not as an observer, not as someone who has learned about it and therefore stands slightly apart from it, understanding it from the outside, but as a node, as a place where the web comes through. The carbon in you was forest before it was you and will be forest again. The water in you has been rain and river and ocean and the interior of clouds and the morning dew on a spider's web. You are not adjacent to the cycle, you are the cycle, one particular, temporary, extraordinary expression of it. The trees know this, in whatever way trees know anything. The fungi know this, in whatever way fungi know anything. And somewhere beneath the surface of things, in the part of you that is older than language and older than thought and older than the particular configuration of neurons that produces the feeling of being a self, you know it too. You have always known it. It is the thing that makes the forest feel like coming home. The thing that makes the night sky feel familiar even though you have never been there. The thing that makes the sound of rain on a roof feel like safety. The thing that stirs when you stand at the edge of the ocean and feel, just for a moment, the full scale of what you are standing beside. Recognition. Not of something new. Of something very, very old. That you are of this. That you are this. Let your breathing slow now. If it has not already, let the weight of your body be fully given to whatever is beneath you, not held, not managed, not distributed, given, released into, the way the leaf releases from the branch in autumn, not falling, exactly, but letting go, trusting the air, trusting the ground, trusting the ancient process that has been receiving falling things for longer than leaves have existed. The forest is still here. On the other side of your walls, wherever there is a tree, wherever there is a patch of unmowed ground, wherever there is a park or a garden or a wild corner that has not been entirely tidied, the mycelium is there, threaded through the dark soil, carrying on. And in the great forests, the ones that have been forests for centuries, the ones where the old trees stand with their centuries of rings inside them and their deep-woven mycorrhizal partnerships extending through the soil in all directions, in those forests, right now, in the dark, in the middle of this same night, the network is alive and active and doing the work it has always done. The mother trees are standing. In the dark, roots deep, network wide, holding the shape of the forest the way they have always held it, sending their slow signals through the soil, passing their carbon toward the ones that need it, patient, ancient, entirely untroubled by the hour. And the seedlings in their shadow are receiving. Quietly, in the dark, growing by increments too small to measure in a single night, sustained by something they cannot see and do not need to understand. Simply receiving. Simply continuing. That is what tonight is. Simply continuing. Not solving. Not achieving. Not even resting with intention. Just continuing, the way the forest continues, the way the mycelium continues, the way the ancient, patient, quietly extraordinary world continues, beneath us and around us and inside us, whether we are watching or not. You are good. Right now, as you are, in the dark, at the end of whatever the day was, you are good, and the world that made you is glad of you, in whatever way a world can be glad, which is perhaps simply this, that it is here, and you are made of each other, and for this small span of dark and quiet, you are resting together. Let the words go now. Let the story thin, the way the forest thins at its edges, gradually, tree by tree, into something more open. Let the narrative release. There is only the dark now, and the quiet, and somewhere in the soil, a thread, moving, carrying something, in the slow way, in the patient way, in the way of very old things that have been doing this since before the first forest, since before the first root, since the very beginning of the conversation between the living world and the dark. You are held. You have always been held. Sleep now. The threads are moving. And so are you.